Greetings and salutations, everyone. My name is Andrew Kirchhoff, and welcome to my YouTube channel. Today, we're talking about my Week 3 tight end rankings for the 2020 fantasy football season. On today's episode, we're going to be talking about my top 12 tight end rankings. But before then, we'll talk about matchups at the tight end position, which teams are giving up the most points to opposing tight ends in a weekly basis in a half PPR scoring format. As we usually do, all of our rankings are half PPR based, trying to meet everyone in the middle, whether you play standard or full PPR. So again, rankings are subject to change. For those of you who are trying to stay up to date on your rankings, you can either come by Sunday morning, 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. We will be doing a live stream here, Kickoff with Kirchhoff for Week 3. I'll have updated rankings then, but otherwise you can go ahead and hit me up on patreon.com/AndrewKirchhoff. Link is down in the description, all the relevant information regarding that. Outside of that, today we're talking about some tight ends. I did talk about some injury news and some updates on my quarterback video. Go check that out if you haven't seen it. Outside of that, let's talk about some players going into Week 3 and the potential of some of these tight ends. Again, I think as the weeks progress and the more relevant tight ends we begin to see on a weekly basis, this top 12 list might turn into a top 16 list, because I really struggled to find 12 players, because the 11 to 12 spot could literally been filled with 5 different players. So we'll talk about all those options regardless this week. But again, this list is beginning to, I guess, expand itself as the weeks progress, especially with so many relevant options at the tight end position. So let's go ahead and let's start talking about some matchups really quickly to give you guys some perspective as to which teams are giving up the most points to opposing tight ends on a weekly basis in a half PPR scoring format. As of this moment in time, the Cleveland Browns have been really struggling against opposing tight ends. Week 1, Mark Andrews had himself 2 touchdowns. And it's just this past week, CJ Uzomah, prior to his Achilles injury, had himself a touchdown in a pretty good game. And then even then, the backup tight end, Drew Sample, comes into the game, has himself a pretty relevant fantasy performance. Outside of that, the New Orleans Saints giving up a lot of points. Again, just this past week, Darren Waller definitely did dominate them, but it's not the first time. I mean, in Week 1, O.J. Howard had himself a pretty good fantasy relevant game. So again, they have been struggling against tight ends. The Jacksonville Jaguars, I think Mike Gesicki is a incredible option this week going against them after that breakout performance in Week 2. Again, they're going to try to stop him, but I don't think they'll be able to. But this kind of gives you a little bit of perspective as to which teams are giving up a lot of points to opposing tight ends, which matchups you might want to be going after. Again, a couple of the ones that stick out to me: the Baltimore Ravens against Travis Kelce, the Buffalo Bills versus against Tyler Higbee. Those are things that I want to key in on and potentially take advantage of. But again, if you own those guys, you're probably going to be starting them regardless this week. So it's not really a big deal. But some of the tougher matchups going into Week 3, the Indianapolis Colts, the San Francisco 49ers, and the New England Patriots are giving up very few points to opposing tight ends. Even the New York Giants, these teams are just locking down tight ends and not letting them have any sort of productivity. And it kind of makes a pretty big difference, because again, we have Darren Waller playing against the New England Patriots, which again is one of these top tight ends. We have potentially Evan Engram against the 49ers, and either Jordan Reed or George Kittle against the Giants. So again, these are matchups that, even though are tougher, I'm probably still playing my stud tight end against them and just hoping for the best case scenario going into this week. But just to kind of give you some perspective as to which teams are giving up points to opposing tight ends, this kind of covers it all, covers our bases. Now we can go ahead and start talking about my Week 3 tight end rankings for the 2020 fantasy football season. Starting off with my number 1, Travis Kelce. Again, like I mentioned a little bit prior, Travis Kelce plays against the Baltimore Ravens. They've been giving up a lot of points to opposing tight ends as of thus far this season. I think that's fantastic for Travis Kelce. But the fact of the matter is that Travis Kelce, regardless of what matchup he's in, is always going to succeed. This past week had an incredible amount of targets, 14 targets leading to 9 receptions, 90 receiving yards and a touchdown. That's back-to-back weeks with receiving touchdowns in this offense, in a matchup in which they should be forced to have to score a lot in order to keep up with Baltimore and vice versa. So we could see a lot of utilization of Travis Kelce, which is the hope. Again, if you have Travis Kelce, you're starting him regardless. I don't really need to talk about him for a minute. He should be an automatic start. Mark Andrews is my number 2. Again, another one of these players that should be fantastic. Against Kansas City defense, he's probably going to see a lot of Tyrann Mathieu in coverage. But again, Mark Andrews is most deadly when they get down into the red zone and when he's able to use his size, speed, and strength against these smaller cornerbacks and safety. So as of right now, I think Mark Andrews, regardless of the matchup, regardless of everything that we even saw last week, there was very little utilization of Mark Andrews last week, especially in the passing game. What was it? 3 targets, 1 reception for 29 yards, something of that extent, or 19 yards. I mean, to be honest, Mark Andrews doesn't really need to be used when you're winning as hard as they were. So you kind of, hold back on him. You don't force any injuries. You don't have to play him in the fourth quarter. You go ahead and just relax with Mark Andrews because you're winning by 20 points already. That's why Mark Andrews just wasn't a factor last week, is because the Baltimore Ravens already had the game in the bag. So as of this upcoming week, I look at it, I think they're going to have to score. And Mark Andrews is the number one receiving option of this offense. He's going to get a lot of opportunity. He should be able to feast. The next option I wanted to talk about is Darren Waller. After that incredible performance, 16 targets leading to 12 receptions, 105 yards, and a touchdown. We all know it. We all watched it. It was incredible. But the question is, can he go ahead and reproduce those kind of numbers, or at least something similar to those numbers, against the New England Patriots in Bill Belichick's defense? They lock down tight ends. I know that for certain. They've always been great against the tight end position, but I don't really look at Darren Waller as a tight end. I look at him as a wide receiver in a tight end's body. He was a wide receiver in college. They move him around the formation like he's a wide receiver. They play him in the slot. They play him out wide in one-on-one coverage. They play him right next to an offensive tackle. They move him into the backfield sometimes on different formations and leak him out. There are so many ways that they use Darren Waller as an X-factor athlete on their team. He's no longer just a tight end. He is just the go-to on their offense in terms of the passing game. And regardless of that, I think Darren Waller is still going to be able to produce. He's my number 3 on the week. I really have a hard time sitting him after that week 2 performance regardless. The next tight end I wanted to talk about is Zach Ertz. And Zach Ertz is kind of, I don't know, he's pushing my buttons as of right now. It's really getting to my last nerve because, to be honest, the fact that Dallas Goedert has out-targeted him and out-produced him in each of the last 2 weeks, that's beginning to frighten me. Sure, Zach Ertz, he himself has gotten 7 targets each of the last 2 weeks. Has been, somewhat relevant. Last week had 5 catches for 42 yards. That's decent, but it's not going to cut it in a half PPR setting, especially when Dallas Goedert is hauling in 9 targets or 8 targets on a week, and that opportunity is being siphoned away from Zach Ertz's potential. So as of right now, I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt. You play against Cincinnati. Should be an easy matchup. Shouldn't really have to worry. If Carson Wentz wants to play a little bit better and at least step up to the plate and allow Zach Ertz to thrive, then we're good to go. Otherwise, Zach Ertz is going to be slowly falling out of this top 12 list because unless he's scoring touchdowns, he's definitely going to struggle as the weeks progress, trying to keep up with some of these other guys that are scoring on a weekly basis. Not even just 1 touchdown, but potentially 2 touchdowns. Either way, we've given the benefit of the doubt. He's my number 4. Number 5 is Tyler Higbee. Again, we talked about the matchup against the Buffalo Bills. Tyler Higbee was an absolute red zone phenom last week. 5 targets, 5 receptions, 54 yards, but 3 receiving touchdowns. That kind of production is just something we don't see. But let's not forget, Tyler Higbee last season, amongst all tight ends, tied with Travis Kelce for the most red zone targets. They both had 20 red zone targets last year. So it's not a surprise that Tyler Higbee is beginning to see all this work. Let's not forget, at the back end of last season, weeks 13 through 17, Tyler Higbee was a red zone threat and was starting to take away a couple opportunities from Cooper Kupp in this offense. As it progresses, as we currently see, Tyler Higbee's once again being heavily targeted in the red zone. With Gerald Everett still dealing with some back injuries, it continues to kind of lean in the direction of Tyler Higbee being more and more of a threat in this offense. He's my number 5 this week against Buffalo. Our number 6 for this week is Jonnu Smith. And Jonnu Smith, as of the last 2 weeks, has been incredible. I think he's the number 1 overall tight end in a half PPR scoring format as of this moment in time. And it's mainly due to the fact that A.J. Brown has been banged up and there has been more opportunity for Jonnu Smith to feast down on the red zone and get himself more and more opportunity. In the last 2 weeks, he scored 3 touchdowns. Just this past week, 5 targets for 4 receptions, 84 receiving yards, had a big play early in the game that really set him up for a touchdown. So again, Jonnu Smith, if in fact A.J. Brown is going to continue to miss time, is going to be more and more of a threat here in this offense. If Derrick Henry's not getting those goal line touches, they're going to continue to hit him with play action down on the goal line because everyone's keying in on a run support. Jonnu Smith's going to continue to feast in the passing game, be another one of these relevant options in fantasy. And again, he's been playing well. He's going to continue to do that against Minnesota. Mo Alley-Cox this past week had 5 catches for over 100 yards. Jonnu Smith definitely capable of doing that. And definitely a better tight end. But either way, should have a really good opportunity against Minnesota. And he's my number 6. Moving on, we have Mike Gesicki as my number 7 overall tight end this week. Like I mentioned before, the Jacksonville Jaguars are giving up a bunch of points to opposing tight ends. Mike Gesicki came out with an incredible performance in week 2. 11 targets leading to 8 receptions, 130 receiving yards, and a touchdown. I think this is going to be a shootout, and I definitely expect Ryan Fitzpatrick to have that DGAF mentality where he comes out and just throws the ball in the direction of his receivers, Devontae Parker, Mike Gesicki. He's going to hyper-target these guys in a fantastic matchup, and I think this is going to be a back-and-forth shootout, and Mike Gesicki is going to see a lot of work this afternoon. Could potentially be another one of these guys that is available on your waivers. I mean, we talked about it on Waiver Wire Monday. Gesicki and Jonnu Smith are owned in 60% of leagues on Yahoo. That is an absolute travesty. I cannot understand that is an actual reality in fantasy football. He needs to be picked up and played this week. They've got great matchups, and they're great overall tight ends. Again, moving on, we have ourselves Hunter Henry as my number 8. Hunter Henry with whether it was Tyrod Taylor and or Justin Herbert. And I know it's going to be Justin Herbert going forward after the entire debacle of what happened with the puncturing of the lung prior to the game with Tyrod Taylor. But regardless, Hunter Henry's been relevant with whichever quarterback they've had. He's been heavily targeted just this past week against Kansas City. 8 targets leading to 6 receptions and 83 receiving yards. This upcoming week, they take on the Carolina Panthers. I think, again, he's going to be continuously used in this offense because he is a safety blanket of sorts for their quarterback options. And I think the way he's been playing, the way he played at the back end of last season, averaging about 10 fantasy points per game, that's what he's done thus far this year. And he's going to continue on that pace with obviously the upside of a touchdown down in the red zone. So again, Hunter Henry, another one of these great options being targeted heavily and used within their respective offense. Moving on to our next tight end, we have ourselves Noah Fant at number 9. Noah Fant has been a fantastic tight end this season. And again, he's right now the number 3 overall tight end in a half PPR scoring format. And it shouldn't be a surprise. I knew he would make that second-year jump. And as of thus far, even with Jeff Driscoll at quarterback, had himself some pretty good utilization last week. Had himself 5 total targets, 4 receptions, 54 receiving yards, a touchdown, and even a 2-point conversion. This upcoming week, they take on the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. But if many of you do not remember, last season, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers struggled heavily against the tight end position. In week 1, Jared Cook was able to take advantage of that. Sure, in week 2, there really wasn't any utilization of Ian Thomas, but I think this week, with Jeff Driscoll at quarterback, he's going to have to be able to get the ball out of his hands, probably shorter passes here and there near the line of scrimmage. And I think the safety blanket as of right now and the chemistry that we saw last week is with Noah Fant. I think he's still a relevant option with Drew Lock out for a couple weeks with that shoulder injury. Talking about Jared Cook, we have ourselves Jared Cook as my number 10 this week. He scored a touchdown last week, and that's fine. But he's got to get more targets, especially in a revenge game against the Raiders. The fact that he doesn't get more utilization there, especially when the other team's using their tight end as much, we got to get Jared Cook more involved. 5 targets for 2 receptions and 13 yards. That's not enough. Sure, he scores a touchdown, he saves his week, but this upcoming week he plays against the Green Bay Packers. This is another respective revenge game. Jared Cook has played for the Green Bay Packers again, and I think as of right now, we got to get Jared Cook more involved. I think they'll definitely go ahead and allow Drew Brees to throw the ball more. He's got to be able to find Jared Cook. Again, he's such a big target on the field, and he's definitely in a better matchup against Green Bay. So again, I expect Jared Cook to have himself a pretty good week here as my number 10 overall tight end here. Now, number 11 and 12 is going to be a mixture of players because I really do think it depends on what the injury report is going to look like this week. Now, if George Kittle misses, I like Jordan Reed as my number 11 tight end this week. Why? Because Nick Mullins is likely to be the starting quarterback this week with, Jimmy Garoppolo dealing with that injury. So if in fact that's the case, Jordan Reed's going to get a lot of utilization. Just looking at what they did with Jordan Reed last week, 8 total targets, 7 receptions, 50 receiving yards, and 2 receiving touchdowns. Jordan Reed is back, baby. I mean, he looks like the way he did for the Washington football team. Now, that being said, it all depends on whether or not Kittle is going to play or not. Kittle's been limited to practice thus far this week in Wednesday and Thursday's practices, but there is always a chance that he ends up playing this week and will take away some value and or all the value from Jordan Reed, in which we potentially ignore him. But if in fact he's going to play, Nick Mullins, let's not forget, the reason why George Kittle was such a incredible play in 2018 for the San Francisco 49ers. The reason why he broke all those records that year, had like the most receiving yards for a tight end in a single season, almost broke Shannon Sharp's record for the most receiving yards by a tight end in a single game. He almost really took over the tight end position in that one year because Nick Mullins was at quarterback. It wasn't with Jimmy Garoppolo. Jimmy Garoppolo tore his ACL earlier that season. It was because of Nick Mullins and his constant utilization of the tight end position. So again, if in fact Nick Mullins is at quarterback, there is no Kittle. Jordan Reed is a fantastic option, so I wanted to name him there. I think number 12 is not a bad option for Evan Engram. I know it's a very tough matchup against the San Francisco defense, but again, San Francisco is missing a lot of defensive threats, and I think it's definitely going to show. Sure, they've got some good coverage linebackers, but I think Evan Engram, with the absence of Saquon Barkley, is going to get utilized even more. Last week, had himself some pretty good opportunity. 8 targets leading to 6 receptions and 65 yards. That's perfectly fine. It's a tougher matchup, but I expect them to use Evan Engram even more this week as we continue to progress throughout the season. Now, a couple players I wanted to mention. Moving on to Hayden Hurst, potentially at number 12. I think Hayden Hurst could definitely be a prospect that we want to go ahead and utilize or potentially invest in this upcoming week if, in fact, Julio Jones is absent. It's against the Chicago Bears. It's a tougher matchup, but if Julio Jones is gone, their top 3 options become Calvin Ridley, Russell Gage, then here comes Hayden Hurst. Last week, he was perfectly fine against that Dallas Cowboys defense. 8 total targets, 5 receptions, 72 receiving yards, and a touchdown. Again, if Julio is out, I really do like the potential of Hayden Hurst this week. Another player that I wanted to mention is Dallas Goedert. I mean, we throw him up ahead of Jordan Reed because, again, if in fact George Kittle is going to play, then George Kittle gets thrown into this little mess. So we can throw George Kittle on screen as well if you guys would like. We'll throw him up there. But either way, we're talking about Dallas Goedert as of right now. Goddard's not a bad option either. There's so many potential tight ends that could be great plays. The fact that he's gotten 17 targets in the last 2 weeks, plays against Cincinnati, and teams are heavily covering Ertz and leaving Dallas Goedert to just do whatever he wants, that's a great option. Again, George Kittle's above my head because if he plays, I'm ready to fire him up. With Nick Mullins, he was fantastic. I'm not really too worried about Jordan Reed if in fact Kittle is healthy and active and ready to go. So again, we just kind of put it out there, and that's pretty much it. We'll go ahead and we'll take Dallas. We'll take Dallas Goedert off the screen. We'll take Mr. George Kittle off the screen. We'll bring back where's his name? Where's Jordan Reed? Here we go. Should be pretty good to go. I think there's a lot of tight ends that you can use. You can even use Logan Thomas. I mean, again, the Cleveland Browns are not doing a lot against the tight end position. Could give up a lot of points there. There's a lot of relevant tight ends that you could throw into your lineup this week. But just keep in mind, the tight end position has a lot of studs. Do not ignore your studs. Play them this week. The guys that are in this top 8 or 9 echelon of tight ends are go-tos for certain. But either way, I want to thank everybody for watching. Enjoy Thursday Night Football's game between the Miami Dolphins and the Jacksonville Jaguars. Should be a fun contest. For those of you who are looking to find other content outside of this that I do, you can go over to patreon.com/AndrewKirchhoff. All the relevant information there down in the description. Otherwise, smash the like button, subscribe to the channel if you have not yet already. We're trying to get to 27,000 subscribers. I really do appreciate your guys' support. And until next time, which will be tomorrow, Hidden Gems, I'll see you guys. Peace.